Well, we left off with the camera. The shutter release now works nicely, timed with the releasing the film advance lever for the next shot. What else did I do to this? Oh yeah, of course we did the hinge pin so that the front opens and shuts easily now. I'm going to move on to the next most serious problem, and the one that's crippling the camera really, and that's the viewfinder. The viewfinder is exceptionally hazy. It's like a grey cloud. Well, I think you can see clearly here, this is peering into the finder of that Retina IIIc, that the finder is exceptionally foggy. It's very hard to see what's going on through there. The haze is just incredible. This is the problem we've got to deal with. You can just make out highlights through the little diamond shaped patch. That's lighting up the highlights, but the rest of it, the view is just grey haze really, no good at all. So we need to get in and take the rangefinder assembly out and clean it up, and I'll do this piecemeal. There are various levels you can get to with cleaning the viewfinder system, ranging from easy and not likely to get you into a lot of trouble, right up to serious and everything's in tiny pieces, and if you don't put it back together right, it's crippled. So we'll start with the easy stuff. First I'm having a look at the glass on the camera top, looking at the glass on the eyepiece, looking at the glass on the front cover there. I can see I've got a handy fingerprint on that piece of glass for a start. So I'll clean those up with a bit of glass cleaner. So taking a bit of normal domestic window cleaner on a cotton bud, Q-tip for you Americans, I'll clean these outer surfaces. You want to dampen the cotton bud. Don't start squirting window cleaner on your camera. That's not going to help. Right, that's the easiest cleaning. Now I'm going to look out the window and see if I've made any improvement. No, that was too much to hope for. So we'll have to get into it. So I'll need to take the top off the camera. You've seen me take the top off the camera before. Open the back. Take the tail of my tweezers, put it through the fork of the rewind, and just unscrew the knob with my fingers and make sure I get that collar as well. Put those to one side. My meter dial has to come off on this camera, so I'm just winding that right round clockwise to the stop, checking where my alignment mark is next to the 1300 ASA scale, and it's halfway between the 18 and 17. I'll make note of that. It's best to write it down so that you can put the dial back in exactly the same position when you reassemble the camera. And here I'm using this tool, which is a screwdriver with the end ground down to two tiny points. You don't need to spend a lot of money on screwdrivers for tasks like that, because you don't need hard steel. Nice cheap soft screwdrivers are easiest to work with. Right, so that can lift off as a piece. We'll reassemble that later. To take the top off the camera, one screw here at the end of the top cover. I'm putting all these loose pieces into a little plastic dish so they don't roll off the bench and get lost. two screws at this end. These are chrome plated brass, fairly delicate. If you slip with your screwdriver you'll mar them up even if you don't damage everything else. Right, to lift the top cover off, hold your finger firmly on the meter to stop it lifting. Lift the top cover off. This brings us to the second easy answer for cleaning. The glass in the top cover itself, the inner surfaces, we've already dealt with the outer surfaces. The inner surfaces we can deal with in the same way. Bit of glass cleaner on a cotton bud. So clean it with one end and then polish it with the clean dry end. With the eyepiece here, you can poke your cotton bud through the opening, and if you swirl it about you'll find that you get pretty good coverage in there. You can't get right to the corners because it's only a rectangular opening, but you can do pretty well. And again I'll use the clean end to polish that up. That looks good. Likewise, the little diagonal patch for the rangefinder here. You can come in from the inside, swirl that all around. And what you're likely to find on these glass surfaces is fingerprints and similar on the outside, and possibly dust or a haze from oil that's come from elsewhere in the camera. So those windows all look pretty good now. I'll pop that back on the camera. In some cases that's all you might need to do. But I'm going to look out the window. It hasn't really fixed my problem. The problem here is too severe, but it might have fixed yours. Next stage. We have about 20 glass air surfaces in the viewfinder system here. So there's plenty of surfaces to gather up grime. So the easy to get to ones are the eyepiece glass at the rear here, obviously the front surface here, and the prism, both the back surface and the front surface there. So taking a cotton bud, we'll do the same again. Let's put a bit of glass cleaner on that. I'm hopeful that this particular surface here will make a difference because the haze is mostly in the main finder, not the little rangefinder patch at this end. And I'll peer through the window and see what that looks like. And it's no better. So, easy answers are out here. What other surfaces have we got access to that you could conveniently clean from the outside? Well, probably only one, and that would be if the rear glass here was hazy on the inside surface. You'd remove this screw, lift out that glass lens, clean it and pop it back in. It's not easy to deal with anything else here while that's in the camera. So let's remove it from the camera body. There are two screws holding the rangefinder to the top of the camera body. One of them loosened up okay. The other one's got a funny feel to it. To a slightly smaller screwdriver in case the screwdriver's just not dropping down into the slot. That'll do it. Okay, you lift the rangefinder off the camera body, tip it upside down and recover the two screws. There's nothing much to see wrong with those, they look good. So with the viewfinder out of the camera, what other options do we have for cleaning? Okay, well, looking in here, I don't think you'll ever be able to see this. I'll try zooming in, see if I can get a better picture for you. So what I'm going to do here is make a somewhat smaller Q-tip or cotton bud. We're pulling some of this cotton out. See if I can wrap that around the end of a toothpick. Well, it'd be better if I had a toothpick that didn't snap in half. Right. So I've made myself a miniature Q-tip there. I'll use a little bit of glass cleaner. And this front surface of the middle component here, I'm going to clean that. And the rear surface of that middle component, I'll clean that too. And I'll just take a dry Q-tip, make myself a miniature. And just dry those two surfaces off. Alright, now I'm going to look out the window and see if I've made any impression on the haze. And I have. But it's by far, it's not completely removed at all. I've probably reduced it by about a third in this case. So at this stage, it's really not worth me playing around with that because I know that I'm going to have to strip the whole thing down. But just cleaning those surfaces without disturbing anything in the rangefinder may well do the trick for you. It's not going to do it for me today. So, taking the rangefinder apart, I think I need my all-purpose block of wood. To take this apart, first thing I want to do is remove this moving arm. That's held in place with a pinhead screw here, and one thing you need to be aware of is that that pinhead screw goes through to a little nut on the other side which slides in a channel so that it's adjustable in position backwards or forwards in this direction. We need to get that back in very much the same position it came from. So I want to scribe a line to help me find the correct position when I return it there. So what I'm going to do is take a sharp screwdriver and just run it around the end of that arm, and that's just scribed a line neatly against there on that rangefinder body. To unscrew this, you may get away with a very stiff pair of tweezers. You may be able to use circlip pliers like this that have been ground down to 2 sharp points. I've got this little tool. It's 2 pins on it. The width is adjustable. This was made by Beljan, the same business that made the tools for removing retainer rings from shutters, and that'll loosen that for me quite nicely without a struggle. Then I can spin that off with my tweezers. So here we have our screw. We have a wavy washer. We can lift the arm off there. There's a spring here and a pin that runs through the spring. I'll stretch that out slightly and remove the pin. Lift that arm off. Pop that to one side. There's the retaining nut I mentioned, it was on the inside. To take this further apart, so we can start with the prism at this end. Two screws. These 2 screws on the body. They hold the prism assembly to the rangefinder body. They also will adjust the angle of the prism for the vertical adjustment. I'll just take those screws right out. There's 2 more screws right here on the prism. Well, there's 1. Leave it alone. Don't disturb that. If you disturb that, you have a hell of a job putting everything back together. The rear eyepiece glass, single screw. Lift that cover off. Here's the eyepiece glass. It's a bit hazy on the inside, but it's nothing notable. So the front components and the middle component. Right, well, this is where we gets a bit trickier. Take this screw off. Take that retainer off. Now the middle component is held in with a spring frame. So I'll just get the tip of my tweezers under that and slide that out. And slide this centre component out. Now the centre component's got silvered lines on there for the viewfinder, for the framing. And you might be able to see here, it's quite clean in the middle where I cleaned it by poking the cotton bud in. Around the outside where I didn't get to, it's very dirty and hazy. Pop that down there. This front group here, that's trouble to get out. It's held in place with two spots of lacquer at the top here and at the bottom. And we need a little touch of acetone to soften that up. So normally I just get a drop of acetone on the tip of my tweezers, apply it to that little notch there where the adhesive is, at the top and at the bottom. Hope that that soaks in, flip it back over, do it again. Normally you need to do this more than once. And we'll see if that has a desired effect. Hopefully that'll soften up the lacquer and we'll be able to get this out. Now that retaining spring that we have for the middle component, that frame, we've got much the same arrangement on the front. So I'll get my tweezers in there, pull that out. Now that was in what I would consider the wrong way round. I don't know, it makes a hell of a difference, but that's not the way I'd have put it in. I'd have put it in the other way. Right, and I've just pushed down on that very lightly with my fingers on that component. It immediately shifted. So it's not stuck in there anymore. So let's separate this. Here's our front piece. This has our parallax correction marks on it. It's a piece of celluloid or something. It's not affected by the acetone. Here we have three pieces. A plain piece of glass, in this case very, very hazy, with silvered lines on it. That's part of the framing line system. A little metal mask and the front glass. This is quite dirty looking, but some of that could just be where the acetone that I'd plopped on had run down inside. The glass here, particularly this piece, is very, very hazy. With all of these glass here surfaces, a little bit of haze on each surface is enough to cause you big problems. You end up with much more light reflected around inside the finder than just passing through it. So now I'm just inspecting the body of the rangefinder. All I've got left in here is the semi-silvered mirror. There's only one surface on there that you can clean manually. It's the one that put it towards the front here. I'm looking at the state of that. It's a little bit grimy. If I clean that off now, it'll mean that I won't have to go crazy with the ultrasonic cleaner when I'm cleaning it. So this is the front surface, the one that points to the front of the camera. Do not clean the rear surface, the one that points to the eyepiece, like this, because if you do, you'll rub the silver off quick as a wink. I'm just going to look out the window through that single piece of glass. There's a degree of haze there, but it's minimal. The body here, I want to clean that in the ultrasonic cleaner, but I will pre-clean two pieces of glass here and then finish them off in the ultrasonic cleaner, the ones with the silvered lines on. Right, well with these pieces of glass here, I'm just going to clean these now with glass cleaner on a cotton bud, a Q-tip. I'm cleaning both surfaces of these pieces of glass with the silvered lines on it. Because they're very hazy and it's probably tiny oil droplets really. A haze of oil droplets caused that. You wouldn't normally expect dust to infiltrate the camera and form such an impenetrable haze on that glass. I'm just holding that up to the light. Well, I was. That's pretty good. That was the one towards the front of the finder. This one here, this was the one from the middle of the finder. And the silvered lines on here, they're on one side of the glass, not both sides of the glass. They're reasonably robust, but you'd want to be careful about how abrasive you were trying to clean them. That looks a lot better. The front glass here, let's clean that. This is the inner surface. It's quite hazy. I might have to clean this with acetone because with the acetone running down there, it's taken some lacquer with it, and that's contaminating those surfaces. So I'll just clean that with some acetone. Particularly the top and bottom edges of this piece, because they're the edges that were glued in place. I'll just see what that looks like. That's pretty good. I'll clean that with some glass cleaner now too for good measure. I'm just checking that there's no haze of lacquer on there at all. That looks good. This piece, this mask, of course that's got some lacquer on it. You can wipe this with the acetone, it won't melt it. That looks good. And the only thing I've got left here, I think, is the eyepiece glass, which was not particularly bad. I'll just give that a quick wipe here. Now I'll leave that, we'll clean that properly later. So I just need to clean this greasy mark off here. Now that's from where the arm swung, and it's just a bit greasy. I just want to clean it off so it's not contaminating our cleaning solutions. Here I'm just using naphtha, cigarette lighter fuel. Just put a drop on the cotton bud and clean this surface off. This is the greasy surface that the arm's been swinging against. I just want to make sure there's no grease floating around loose, because otherwise it'll contaminate my solutions. That should be good. Now I'm going to put these pieces of glass with the silvered frame lines back in here for further cleaning. So I'm making sure I know which surface is which. The front one, it has the smaller rectangle. The silvered lines are on the inside surface. Slide that into the front position here. This one with the larger rectangle, slide that into the middle position. And we have its little retaining bracket here. And a screw that held that bracket in place. Alright, so I'm going to clean this now in the ultrasonic cleaner. I've got 3 pieces of glass. The plain piece of glass with the small rectangle of silvered lines. This plain piece of glass with a larger rectangle of silvered lines. And the semi-silvered mirror. That's the only glass that's in there. And now I'll move through and do the ultrasonic cleaning.